Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Sue Squared. Both Suzanne Strausser, VP of Consulting and Development, and Suzanne Weber-Smatko, Manager of Consulting Services, and they are both here from CORE. Glad you could both be with us.
Glad to be here, X.
Thanks.
Welcome back for part 2, ladies. Again, great to have you here. Now let's start with metrics, and we're going to talk with Suze on this one.
Okay.
How can those lead to overcomplication of your QMS?
So I look at objectives and metrics and KPIs, whatever you want to call them, as a subset of documentation. We've seen customers who measure all number of things, pun intended, but none of it really matters to the management team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are the ISO measures over there. So it wastes a lot of time preparing numbers, sometimes charts, sometimes procedures to go along with that whole process on how to calculate. And nobody really uses it for decision making.
Right.
And so this is where you really have to start melding the QMS and the business together.
So like we talked about, I want to say it was last year, really bringing ISO into what you're already doing.
Yeah.
That's going to simplify it because you're already doing it in a management meeting.
Right.
You're not doing it as a management review meeting separate from management meeting, that you're doing 80% of it already. Take those minutes, the things you do need to document. Here we're saying don't document a lot, but this is a documentation you do need because you need by the standard, you need to document how you're doing your management review.
Yep.
But don't put those as separate exercises from your normal management meetings and what you're doing.
Exactly.
You know, that goes back to what we said initially was identify what you do need to define.
Right.
Right? When you talk about the objectives, you know, when we implement a project, one of the things that you're going to have to provide, again, we don't do everything for an auditor, but you'll have to provide it to an internal auditor. Mm-hmm. You'll have to provide it to an external party audit. And it clarifies for your leadership team and your team, if you do define your objectives with your targets and what data you're going to use to substantiate that. Mm-hmm. That is one of the things that we consider as one of the important documents that you should define.
Right.
Because you can walk into a business and you can look at their quality manual and be like, okay, well, what do you measure?
Yep.
And what are your goals and targets if it's not, it's not real clear. So again, prioritizing and knowing what you should define. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we help customers with that every day.
Well, you mentioned objectives. How can those be, Suze, how can those be overcomplicated?
Well, I mean, when you settle on the right objectives, whatever that may be, you still need to look at how you collect them in a way that's not overburdensome. They're supposed to be actionable. So if it takes you 6 months, say, to collect something, it's probably not the right measure.
Yeah.
Or there are different ways to measure things. So let's think about nonconformances, for example. You could look at a % increase in your nonconformances, or as a % of sales, or the number of, like a discrete number, or the top 5 reasons, or how many escape to a customer. I mean, I could go on and on, but, figure out what's best for you and things you can take action on and things you can actually collect.
Right. And maybe you can build from those in the future.
Exactly.
But don't take that elephant and say, we need to manage the whole front half of the elephant. Well, maybe we should just be looking at the toe and see how that leads up to the front.
I think that's an exercise everybody should go through in management review, at least annually, to take a look at your measures, how you're collecting them. Are you really doing anything with them? Or do you have the right targets?
Is it giving value? Is it giving you value?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Is it telling you something?
Yes. A story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're all about metrics, and if you don't measure it, you can't analyze it. But you don't want to analyze everything or make your analyzation too large that you can't utilize it. So now, Suzanne, what should your goals be for improvement versus how they can overcomplicate your QMS? It's repeatability, it's simplification, those kind of things.
When you are looking to get certified, right? If you're a business and you are interested in getting certified, identify what your needs are. So review your documentation again to ensure it brings you value. Are people referring to the documentation that you have? If not, why do you have it?
Yeah.
Right? Because there is a requirement for you to do a review at a frequency defined to ensure that your documentation is up to date,
Right.
that it reflects the current process, that you're following it.
Right.
Because remember, if you have policies or procedures and work instructions defined, and we're coming to do an audit, and you pull those in, it is now auditable, and I'm going to make sure that you're doing what you say you're going to do, or what you've documented.
Now, one thing that might be confusing is, let's say we're talking about that. What about if the structure of your workforce changes because you are changing the way you're manufacturing something? Let's say you bought a piece of equipment and now it does 3 jobs instead of 1.
Sure.
That you had to have 3 different machines before. You want to review that and look at it, but it's not necessarily that you have to document it. You just need to train. So I guess you have to define that at that point.
Yeah, and that's change management too. I mean, every time you make any kind of substantial change, you should look at the documentation that's associated, communicating to everybody that needs to know, training aspects, all that.
Safety aspect, yeah, all of that stuff.
Safety, environmental, all of it.
But it doesn't mean that you have to, let's write documents on this.
Absolutely not.
So that could be a confusion there where
there's
change and let's just document
No, remember, no documentation is required, right?
Yeah,
no documentation is required. So, you review the documentation. Again, we talked about periodic reviews. We talked about the management and the cost implications of having somebody manage that stuff. Identify what you have versus what you actually need, right? Many companies that we work with, newer quality managers come in, or management representatives, or new, presidents or CEOs or whoever it is that we're working with, and they're coming into a mountain full of documentation. I'm always like, okay, you know what? You don't need, and they're looking for certification or recertification. You don't need to boil the ocean right now.
Right.
Okay. Add it to your improvement plan, or add it to some type of continuous improvement plan to determine and prioritize what documents you should look at and what you need, and don't worry about the rest, because that in itself could cause a huge constraint, or people kind of look at that and get turned off by the fact that, like, oh, wait a minute, this is going to be too time consuming or burdensome for our business.
And, we've talked about this before too. If you know what you're doing, getting certified itself is a fairly low bar. I mean, I hate to say that out loud, but it really is.
Yes.
And so put in place what you need to get certified.
Right.
Yes.
And then, like Suzanne was saying, add that other work to your improvement plans for future.
So
that's a really good point. That's a really good point, because there are processes, we all know, I know we've talked about them, but there are no documentation requirements. However, there is documentation relative to the processes required by the standard.
Yeah.
For example, you have to have a nonconformance document. You have to have a corrective action document. So there are required processes that require evidence and documentation,
forms,
right?
records.
But that's what we mean by prioritize that first,
Yes.
right? And then put all the other stuff on the back burner and go through it if you have time, or just.
Well, and I always say, see, when you have a business problem, then you can add things in.
Yes.
Otherwise, why would you?
So let's say this is a company that's been around. We're coming into a new company. They're working with us to get certified for the first time. They've been around a while. Do you see that over the time as they grow with their QMS, not at the point they get certified, that their documentation actually may become less versus more?
That's interesting. I've kind of seen the opposite.
Okay.
Where people start with a minimum and then add things in.
Let me ask, they already have all of this documentation in place because they've been doing it.
Yes.
And it's not lean. It's not slim. Do you find that now?
Oh, for sure.
They look at a process. Let's just get rid of this documentation because they're actually putting what's important in place.
Yeah.
Only now we're going to have that's auditable. So we're going to actually.
I mean, we've done that ourselves.
Yeah.
We've gotten rid of some things ourselves.
Because I've worked with many customers that, do have that. So when we implement a quality management system, of course, a lot of times the customers use our software, which creates a document master list of the documentation that is required. Oftentimes they have, they come in, they have all this documentation. We simplify their quality management system. the document master list is created in the software, and that is all the documentation that they're going to use. And then they'll add on to their continuous improvement plan. Okay, well, we want to start by defining work instructions for this or a procedure for that so that it's repeatable. They'll actually turn it around and kind of can all their old documentation and say, okay, I'm going to restart this, you know?
Yeah. We don't need all this.
Yeah.
We do it at training if we need to.
No one looks at it.
Yeah.
If they're not using it, why do you have it?
Why do you
Exactly. These are some really good points. Now, we touched on this earlier today. We know ISO standards have gone through revisions, and many managers have gone through those revisions as well. I don't want to say they're old, but, you know, they're not the people that just popped out of college. And from their experience, they may have the wrong interpretation of what's needed. How can that affect and lead to overcomplication?
Definitely interpretation plays a role. And like you said, it's often from previous experience. I know in 1995, I got my company certified, big company, and we had literally over 400 documents.
Ooh.
And had I not had this wonderful and unexpected career since then, I may have believed that that's what you have to do. You know, but now I'm familiar with the changes in ISO standards and the philosophy and auditing techniques and focuses. And I know that it's flat out not required. So I do always take it back to business value. And if you're maintaining some documents and you find yourself wondering, you know, who uses these? Well, then do a stop and think.
Stop and think.
Do a stop and think. You do some investigation, obviously, but I guarantee there's this obsolete inventory, as it were, that you have to keep moving and stepping around. So, you know, stop.
So go find that document that tells you where the trash can is.
Yeah.
And bring that over to wherever you're at and put those documents in there, right?
But but like Suzanne was saying, that's why tools like Core, you know, that we use can help automate reviews. So it keeps it top of mind to revisit annually or whatever period.
Well, it is really important to stay up on revisions and keeping it simple, making sure things are relevant. And that's one reason, not to sound like a commercial, but that we have consultants and places like Core, like us, that say, look, let's take a look at this. Do you really need it? The standard doesn't say you have to document all this. Let us help you in that regard.
Oh yeah, that's very, very true. I mean, you definitely don't want to overcomplicate. You know, again, we're not saying you shouldn't document anything. We're saying simplify everything, but you have to be careful about I don't want to say old timers because, man, I might fit into that category. But I want to say you have to, you know, 20 years ago, the mentality was you needed to document everything. And believe it or not, some people are still under that impression is that you have to have a world of documents, and you really, really don't. So we can help you understand that if you need us to.
I just thought of something else too. To me, simplification also means automation, and it's to not do stuff manually, especially if you have 400 documents. Don't do that manually. You'll kill yourself.
Yeah.
So having a tool doesn't have to be ours, but you know, I'm preferable to ours.
But it's built for that.
To have some kind of automated system so you can route documents and get approvals and keep your master list, you know, current at all times.
Right. I've been written up for not reviewing documents before and not having, you know, back when I didn't have a quality tool. Right. And I've been written up, I think twice, you know, that I can remember on document control because they weren't reviewed, or the last time they were reviewed were like 10 years ago. So having that tool that automatically gives you an email that says, hey, your periodic review is coming up is very, very helpful.
And it doesn't mean that you have to change something at that point. You might just need to review it and say,
oh yeah, there's a new revision and then there's a periodic review, and the periodic, if nothing changes,
it can stay the same.
And it shows you evidence that it's
but you've reviewed it. So, and that's important.
But that's definitely part of simplification as well.
Yep. So let me review from the last two podcasts. So we're talking about, we want to simplify documentation. So in a nutshell, simplifying your QMS, if it's bloated, is simplifying your documentation. Only take what you need, and that's important and relevant. Take your business and take your ISO and meld them together so you're not doing ISO work and meetings and you're doing business meetings.
Should be all one.
They should be combined together. And then take an approach of cleaning out, if you will, what's unnecessary. And that doesn't mean you have to do that when you are starting your QMS. It's based on what you now are going to, I shouldn't say document, but now you're going to look at this process, or we're going to have these objectives, simplify things, get rid of what you don't need at that point. Am I correct?
And automate what you
And
can.
automate, yes. And
Yes.
what you just said with automate,
Yep.
what you're doing.
Listen, it's one of our core values internally.
Yes.
Simplify.
Yep.
Simplify everything and
Yep.
grow from there.
Yep.
Yes.
Do you all have anything else you want to say, either one of you, in regards to us? I mean, this was really helpful. And I really hope a lot of our listeners will go, oh, okay. And maybe some of the older timers will go, wait, I don't need to document everything. When did anybody tell me this?
Are you talking about us?
No.
You're
I'm
talking about me?
No. People outside
I was going to say,
of our
don't make me
company.
reach over this table, Lex, okay?
Yeah.
But do you all have anything else you wanted to share? Or
Documentation is one of the most common findings. Document control
Sure. Yeah.
is one of the highest, most, external findings on document control. So the less you have to manage, the better.
Yep.
So that's,
Okay.
Go through a lean 6 exercise. Absolutely.
yeah. You'll thank us for it. You're welcome.
Yep.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Well, this has really been helpful, and I really appreciate you both being here. Always a pleasure to have you both here, individually or together.
Sure.
And I know we have
This is fun.
more coming up.
Yeah, good topic. Thanks, X.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, customized training, maybe helping you slim down your quality management system, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com, or you can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to do so, and that way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day, everyone.